Gaza's war takes a darker turn. The IDF says 5 Hamas gunmen posed as World Central Kitchen aid workers. Yellow vests, marked vehicle, hidden rifles. An airstrike erased them. Now, reports say Netanyahu is plotting to sack IDF chief Zamir. The battlefield is Gaza, but the real fight may be in Jerusalem. The Israeli Defense Forces announced on August 12th that it had killed 5 armed Hamas operatives who had disguised themselves as World Central Kitchen aid workers in Gaza. The terrorists were eliminated in a targeted airstrike last week after being spotted near a vehicle bearing the WCK logo, despite having no connection to the humanitarian organization. According to reports, the military verified the terrorists' false identity with World Central Kitchen before carrying out the strike. Israel's coordinator of government activities in the territories confirmed with WCK that the organization had no connection to the vehicle's operations.
5 armed terrorists were eliminated in Deir al-Balah while near a vehicle marked with the World Central Kitchen emblem. The terrorists wore yellow vests in an attempt to conceal their activity and avoid being targeted.
Footage released by the military shows at least 8 men in yellow vests standing around the marked vehicle, with several appearing to be armed. The vehicle was located several hundred meters from an Israeli military position.
Hamas and other terrorist organizations exploit the humanitarian effort to advance terrorist objectives at the expense of the welfare of the population in Gaza. The IDF, through COGAT, will continue to work in cooperation with international aid organizations to prevent their exploitation for terrorist purposes.
World Central Kitchen responded firmly to the incident, stating,
"We strongly condemn anyone posing as World Central Kitchen or other humanitarians, as this endangers civilians and aid workers. The safety and security of our teams are our top priority."
This development comes as international pressure mounts for Israel to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza. On Tuesday, foreign ministers from 24 countries and the European Union issued a joint letter demanding increased access for aid organizations. The ministers wrote,
"Famine is unfolding before our eyes.
The UN's World Food Programme warned last week that acute malnutrition is spiking in Gaza, with more than 300,000 children at severe risk. The organization reported that starvation and malnutrition in the territory are at the highest levels ever since the war began, with 500,000 people on the brink of famine. Six sources familiar with the matter told the Associated Press that Israeli officials are engaged in preliminary discussions with South Sudan about potentially resettling Palestinians from Gaza to the war-torn East African nation. The talks represent part of a broader Israeli effort to facilitate mass emigration from Gaza following 22 months of devastating conflict. Joe Slavic, founder of a US lobbying firm working with the South Sudanese government, confirmed he was briefed by South Sudanese officials about the discussions. Slavic revealed that an Israeli delegation plans to visit the country to examine the possibility of establishing camps for Palestinians seeking to leave Gaza. Slavic added that Israel would likely fund these makeshift facilities. The discussions align with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's stated goal of realizing what he describes as American President Donald Trump's vision for relocating much of Gaza's population. In an interview with I-24 News, Netanyahu said,
"I think that the right thing to do, even according to the laws of war as I know them, is to allow the population to leave, and then you go in with all your might against the enemy who remains there."
Edmund Yakani, who heads a South Sudanese civil society group, confirmed he had spoken to South Sudanese officials about the talks. However, he expressed concerns about the proposal, stating,
"South Sudan should not become a dumping ground for people, and it should not accept taking people as negotiating chips to improve relations."
The potential arrangement could help both countries achieve strategic objectives. For South Sudan, such a deal might facilitate closer ties with Israel and create a pathway to improved relations with the Trump administration. the cash-strapped nation seeks the removal of US travel restrictions and sanctions against some South Sudanese elites. Two Egyptian officials with knowledge of the discussions told the Associated Press they have been aware of Israel's efforts to find countries willing to accept Palestinians for months. Egypt has been actively lobbying South Sudan against accepting Palestinians, fearing an influx of refugees across its own border with Gaza. According to a report by Haaretz, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir believes Netanyahu's family and inner circle are orchestrating efforts to remove him from his position. The military leader's concerns stem from his opposition to the government's decision last week to expand fighting operations in Gaza. The report, citing conversations Zamir held with current and former military figures, including sitting general staff members and former IDF Chief Gabi Ashkenazi, reveals the extent of tension between Israel's military leadership and political establishment. These discussions reportedly took place on August 12th, following Defense Minister Israel Katz's accusation that Zamir announced senior military appointments without seeking proper approval. According to Haaretz, associates of Zamir assessed that Netanyahu dictated Katz's conduct because the IDF Chief of Staff was perceived as too independent. A source who participated in Zamir's consultations stated,
"The Chief of Staff understands exactly what's happening and does not intend to hand over the military to Netanyahu and Katz."
Referring to previous IDF Chief Herzi Halevi, who also clashed with Netanyahu over war conduct and efforts to draft ultra-Orthodox men into military service, the source added,
"This is exactly what they did to Herzi to take him into a lame duck."
Zamir's apprehensions intensified after Netanyahu's son Yair implied last month that the general was planning a coup attempt, leading to a direct confrontation between the Prime Minister and military chief during a recent cabinet meeting. Additionally, reports from May indicated that Netanyahu's wife Sarah had lobbied against Zamir's appointment, claiming the general aligned with anti-government protesters and prioritized hostage release over defeating Hamas. The dispute escalated following the cabinet's approval of a plan to take over Gaza City, which appears to be a modified version of Netanyahu's stated intention to control the entire strip. Zamir reportedly warned cabinet members that expanding the fighting would endanger the remaining 50 hostages in Gaza and worsen the humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced that he would not discuss military appointments for 2 weeks, stating through his office that he would study the material and formulate the policy principles on the matter. However, the Cannes public broadcaster reported that Zamir had scheduled a meeting with Katz on August 11th to review the appointment list, but was denied entry to the minister's office, with Katz's secretary citing the minister's busy schedule.